Telos began with an unorthodox idea and an even more unorthodox friendship. I'd been living in Palestine, working as a legal and communications advisor to Palestinian negotiators, and I had what I believed to be an absolutely incredible, outside-the-box idea. I saw a way to build a new American movement. Liberals and conservatives, believers and non-believers, together, fighting not just for equality in Israel-Palestine, but also tackling deep-stuck issues here at home. I saw this multi-faith, multi-partisan movement as the missing link to a just peace in Israel-Palestine. And at its center was an unusual, perhaps overlooked segment of American society, Christians. I know for some of you obvious, for others just totally outside the box. Let me explain. I grew up in San Diego, California, Palestinian Christian family. I knew from an early age just how much Americans impacted the reality on the ground there. We send billions of dollars a year. We shape the entire world's political engagement with Israel, Palestine, and the broader Middle East, whether there's war, whether there's peace in some instances. And we've imported the conflict into our own houses of worship, our communities, our culture, and even our politics. Yet, many Christians who often take such a one-sided approach to this issue had no idea that there are Palestinian Christians. Still today, people will say, when did you convert, Greg? 2,000 years ago? When did you convert? It provides this insight, this cognitive dissonance. No, it's not a conflict about faith, but it provided an in beyond that false binary, to be pro-Israeli as anti-Palestinian and vice versa, that this is a Jewish-Muslim conflict, that this isn't fundamentally about human rights. And so I developed a variety of relationships that led me to this unusual methodology for Telos as a result of engaging in a different way. But none of this could become a reality until Todd and I joined forces.
I first met Greg in Jerusalem in 2004 when I was working at the State Department. It was my first trip to Israel-Palestine, and it was during this awful period called the Second Intifada. Israel was building the barrier that so many of you have seen, and some mutual friends had introduced me to Greg, and I spent the first day driving around East Jerusalem with him and exploring the route of the wall and the impact it was having on Palestinians, especially on Christians and Christian institutions. I'd seen photos and I'd read reports, but I was totally unprepared for the reality I saw that day. And in the week that I spent there, meeting with and learning from Palestinians and Israelis. I grew up in the South, and I spent years involved in Republican politics, including 6 years as the chief of staff to a U.S. senator. I've always taken my Christian faith seriously, and these are the things that actually had shaped my understanding of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. What I saw that day didn't match up with what I thought I knew. From that first visit, I was convinced that America had a national security interest in seeing this conflict resolved. I also saw that the significant role the U.S. plays makes us, in effect, a party to the conflict with both influence and responsibility. But I also saw that we often pursue policies there that make peace harder to achieve because this conflict is a vexing foreign policy challenge that functions more like a domestic political issue. And one of the key drivers of that is people like me, conservative Christians. I went back to DC unable to shake my sense of implication. And over time, I became convinced of the deep need for a different kind of Christian response, one that was grounded in peacemaking and the calling of those who follow Jesus to be agents of healing and reconciliation. But I still didn't know what to do with all this until I had another meeting with Greg.
It was 2008, November, a week after Lehman Brothers failed and the beginning of the last financial crisis. I was having this meeting with Todd in Foggy Bottom, about to tell the senior State Department official about my crazy idea to build the pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian, pro-peace movement that could bring peace to Israel-Palestine and help heal divisions at home. I went through what I'd been doing over the last year, traveling around the world, weaving this network together. And I told him that there was a unique moment to make this happen right now, that this movement had to begin with some kind of personal experience. The trip like the one that he had gone on so many years earlier, to get people to really care and to see that we were implicated.
And so we refined and expanded our mission to own that our work was really about forming communities of American peacemakers across these lines of difference, and then equipping them to help reconcile seemingly intractable conflict at home and abroad. Since 2009, we've led nearly 2,000 of you on Telos trips. Pastors, celebrities, lay activists, members of Congress, artists, and people who may not have fame or status, but who know that they have agency and purpose and have decided to do something with it. We've brought Israelis and Palestinians to Washington and to communities around the country, met with members of Congress, convened national gatherings, bringing together religious and secular, progressive and conservative, advocating for a different way of doing politics and building community. And along the way, you've supported the work of Israeli and Palestinian peacemakers. You've helped vulnerable people in moments of crisis. You've told your stories to your friends and families, blogged, preached sermons, made films and photo essays, and written best-selling books like Colin McCann's A Paragon, or at least one of you did, all rooted in mutual flourishing. 11 years into this, we've made important cultural shifts. Pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian, and pro-peace is a thing in the cities and churches we work in. Churches are discipling their people to be peacemakers. Many of you forged unusual relationships across lines of difference, working together in ways that are necessary to actually change the status quo. We now have a model that is ready for the moment we're living in.
Like Todd said, we're just getting started. The pandemic threw us all, the entire world, for a loop. But it also gave Telos an opportunity to take stock, to really think carefully about what we're doing and why, to experiment with some new programming. We know this moment is an unusual moment for the world and for Telos. We know that the principles and practices of radical peacemaking are needed more than ever before. We know we've built up the assets that can actually really lead our communities and potentially our world to a better place. So with you, we'd like to figure out how we can do that together.